a second to return.
Okay.
Well, everybody's looking good. That's a good sign. All right. Welcome back, Brenda. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would someone move items 1.02, approving our agenda?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? I'm a yes, Mrs. Perry. There you go.
Mrs. Cooper? Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme?
Yes.
Did I get everybody? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And just for purposes of anyone that may be listening from the public, this is a special meeting. It is a budget workshop. And it is all about the budget. There is no public forum when we have when we have workshops. So, all right, Mr. Polvino, I'm turning it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's get this open. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's been an interesting week, to say the least. You have a copy of a PowerPoint to follow along. It's in the executive section. Also, I believe that Jean delivered them to each of your residences as well. This is really a compilation of a couple different things. It's really telling the story about where we've been since February. So I'm going to work you through. I'm not going to review all of the slides. Some of those slides are just background around our around things. I'll work our way through. On the first page, just to go through the budget overview, what we're going to be doing, vision, mission, guiding principles, the budget vote, and the election tentative calendar. We'll have a good conversation about this. As you know, May 1st, the governor announced last Friday when our dates were going to be for our elections and our board votes. We'll talk about that. Budget parameters, we'll briefly hit those. We've reviewed those before. We'll just remind everybody about our budget allocations, about the federal CARES restoration, the tax cap history. Again, just hitting those briefly, but they're great references to just remember, to bring you back to some of those base pieces of information. And then the preparation of the budget, and then budget development history from February to April to now, and then next step. So I'm going to work us down through here. Our vision statement, everything we do, just to remind ourselves with respect to why we do everything we do should always come back to our vision and our mission, and our kids are the center of our vision and mission each and every day. Our guiding principles, our beliefs, the coherence plan, and this is a time, and it's interesting, we actually were talking about collective commitment the other day when we were talking about our continuity of learning plan, which you'll hear the draft on May 12th at the next board meeting. We'll get you up to speed with our continuity of learning plan, which we resubmitted as required by the state. So we're excited to share that with you as we go through the process of sharing that with the rest of the community as well and all of our stakeholders. So that collective commitment, and that's really what a budget is. It's the direction. It's helping us develop a collaborative culture, deepening our learning, and securing accountability. It's all those things. The budget is central to all of our work. With that said, on page 8 is the information with respect to the budget vote and board election tentative calendar. A lot of information was coming out. Robin will tell you that she drove with me the other day for an hour and a half, literally on the phone, talking about just trying to process what was announced at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. And we were processing and talking a lot. And we've been doing a lot of processing all weekend, watching NYSSBA, NISCUS, waiting for guidance. We've been talking to our attorneys really to get guidance to wrap our heads around this. And as you'll see on the next page, on page 9, this is actually a good year, if you will, to be a small city. If there's anything positive about this year and these budgets, and you'll see that in a minute. I'm going to work you through the calendar now just to give you an offset. This is actually NYSSBA's calendar. I've highlighted a few things in red that are really important for small cities or all schools. So May 11th is the deadline for candidates to file nominations. And as you are aware, we have 3 openings for our board. beginning July 1. It'll be July 1, 20 through June 30th, 2023, I guess. And so those candidates must file the nomination by, I believe, 5 p.m. on Monday, the 11th. That is less than a week away. We were surprised by that, but that's the calendar from the state, and you'll see why in a minute. I'll just share that with you. So we're putting a notice on our website, although we're not required to do so. We are going to put that on there, as most districts are, just in case anybody ever said we were looking for the information. It's not a secret. We're making sure that that's out there. So that's the deadline there is no petitions this year, but there'll be information. We'll actually fill out the sheet at the top, which is really indicating if you meet all the requirements to be a Board of Education candidate. On the next one is May 12th. You'll see where I highlighted under number 2, other than small cities, meaning that this is for all the other central school districts have to have their ballots out for the military by 25 days in advance, meaning that they have to have their ballots set by May 15th and mailed. However, you'll see on the next line, it says school districts other than small cities, and that's a good thing to have, is other than, have to, by the 15th, you drop down now, and I'll actually keep going. On the May 21st is the deadlines to adopt the budgets prior to the property tax, which is a little bit challenging for districts that have to mail by the 15th. So obviously their timeline is before that. But the tax cap has to be, or the property tax report card has to be accepted by the board by the 21st, and it has to be transmitted to SED, or State Education Department, by the next day, which is the 22nd, or a Friday. The next one is really important for us. May 26th. That's 14 days before the vote. Small city school districts must determine the names of all candidates duly nominated in the propositions and referenda to be voted on for the ballot 3 days prior to the distribution of military ballots. Because of the holiday, things like that, it actually makes that May 26th. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. So you can see we actually have the advantage of pushing off as far to the 19th, if you will, if we want to. That would allow us to get an idea of what the governor puts out by the May 15th. He's supposed to put out a plan for the year with respect to COVID-19 and the fiscal impacts. And we know that there's been, it's very clear that there's a $13.3 billion gap in New York State. So knowing as much information, thinking about the fact that when you send the ballot out, and then you could find out after your ballot goes out that you could be losing 5% more, is going to make the voting process challenging, because there'll be issues going on. They're going to have to be adjusted. So I'm also recommending on the next line on May 26th, that may be the perfect day for us to do the public hearing. We could do it prior to the board meeting that we already have scheduled. So that's something that we can discuss. We have to hold that public hearing between May 26th and June 2nd. I'm recommending May 26th because we already have that. If you see that, we have to have it has to occur between the 7th and 14th, 14 days prior to the vote. So the 26th is 14 days out from that vote. And then through the end, there's just some nuts and bolts things that have to be done. And then June 9th is the budget vote and election date. And we're talking about what is entailed in that. And Jean can pipe in at any time, but we're really looking for a lot of guidance. I was in a meeting this morning, and I'll give kudos to Ms. Geithner. She, with her experience, she's actually shared, very important, we have a very clear process about when ballots, how they're processed upon coming into the schools, returned. When they come in, they have to be secured because they can't obviously be opened till June 9th. And then a procedures for opening it, logging it in, counting them, all of those pieces. Very regimented. So we're reaching out to our attorneys to make sure that we have a very regimented process that we can document in case there's any questions with respect to that process. We're also looking at the individuals that would be the counters for those. And we're strongly considering doing, as in the past, our pollsters that we've used in the past, not all of them, but really working with the Board of Elections on how that would look like as we've done in the past. So again, Jean can speak to that if need be. On the next slide, I really want us to just reflect, and then we're going to open this up for discussion for a couple of minutes, because I really think we need to process just on these pieces and around these calendar dates, because it's taken us 4 or 5 days to figure this out. So there's a lot of information here. So I'm recommending there's a couple opportunities here. We can ratify the budget on May 12th, or we could schedule a special meeting on May 19th. If it's May 12th, if that's what the board's pleasure is, then I would recommend a budget workshop prior to the board meeting on the 12th, because there are some things we're going to discuss later in this presentation that we're going to need to reflect upon, and I'm looking forward to your feedback and guidance in those areas. The mailing of ballots must happen on or before May 26th in small cities. We're recommending a mailing on the 21st. So if we did do the 19th, that would allow us to complete the ballots. It would allow us to print, I believe, 11,000 ballots, and then package them with return envelopes as well, with a return stamp, postage paid, that type of thing on there as well, in accordance with the guidance. This would allow us, and then we would get that out. That would give us Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, if necessary, to get things out still 4 days in advance of the actual cutoff that we have of May 26th. So that's a lot of information, and Brian talking a lot. So I'm going to get back. Hi, Griff. And then your Griff, but also the little Griff is who I was talking to up in the other picture. Sorry, Miss Griffin, I was recognizing, I saw a face. So that was a lot of information, folks. Your mind, that's going through my mind. But what kinds of questions do you have? Do you have questions about that? About the calendar, about the dates? So us, Oswego, other small cities are the only district. I did talk to Chris Todd, and he has an actual meeting with NYSBA leadership tomorrow. And he said, I never saw this and caught this. And he's going to go to them and say, maybe this is something that needs to be for this year changed for central school districts as well, giving them that opportunity to push off to the 14 days, which gives them a little bit more time to plan and do a good job. Other districts aren't my issue. The Fulton City School District is. So Robin or anybody else?
Yes. So Brian, I would like for Jean, if you wouldn't mind, could you just give a brief overview of what it is you're doing so the board understands? Jean is the lead person on figuring out who's going to get a ballot, what list she's going to use to do that. This is her lane as the clerk of the board. So I'm going to shut up and let the clerk of the board just give you a brief overview what we know so far, and so y'all know. Thanks, Jean.
Okay, so we got from the Board of Elections the registration list of registered voters for Fulton, for this area, and there's about 8,500 names. So the process for us is going to be, obviously we got to get the ballot together, but then there's particular envelopes that we have to order, which we're working through city with those. We're going to have to get a group together to actually stuff everything, get postage on it, and get it in the mail. So it's a machine-y kind of operation. We'll set everything up, and we'll use probably the secretaries that have been working on the school distribution stuff, and maybe a couple more, since there are so many and it's pretty complicated. But on the flip side of that, when it comes time to actually open the ballots and do the counts, what I asked Brian, or recommended to Brian, was that we do bring in our poll workers and ask one of them to take the lead and basically supervise the rest of the poll workers to make sure that things are accurate, but it takes us out of the sense. Questions?
That makes sense.
Anybody else?
So
Jean, we
raise your
also-
hand if you're good with that process. If you understand it and you're good with it, raise your hand, please. And it looks, we're good.
And it's definitely a work in progress. I know to our attorneys how this should go, but it's one of those things. It'll be a line of just stuffing everything, getting it metered, and getting it in the mail, and then getting it back to the family.
Are you going to have a process put together by the attorneys around how we even count them from the moment they arrive back to the moment that they're counted, that we have a whole process documented for each ballot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the other piece is logging in of individuals that want to be considered for election to the board.
Yeah.
How is that process going to work? I know that's a quick turnaround that ends at 5 o'clock on Friday or Monday evening.
Monday, yes. So basically, we're going to use the same form that we used when we were actually doing signatures. And there's a section at the top where you say, this is who I am, and you sign off on it, so on and so forth. That actually should be mailed back to me so that I have an original copy. I can take an email copy, but I'm also going to need the original. So we're in the process of putting the language together to get it on the website. So if there's other people out there who are interested in running, they know what the format is. And of course, my phone number will be there and they can call if they have any questions.
Jean,
So, Jean?
what's the address that we mail them to?
It would be the junior high, 129 Curtis.
Okay.
Jane, do people need to call you, or how are they going to have you send them?
When we put the information on the website, we'll, if you're interested, call this number. We'll get the form out to them.
Okay, thank you.
And then that way we can keep track of who's actually asked for a form. We like to do that just to see where we are in the process and make sure everybody has the forms.
Now, Jean, because this is a little bit different, will we follow up, or will you be following up to verify with people that they actually want to be on the ballot?
Yes. People
Okay.
that have already expressed an interest, I've already fixed the form, changed the dates, so I'll email those out right after this meeting.
Thank you.
Jean, I picked up a form for someone, so you don't have his name.
Do you want to have him reach out to me, Nick?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, you have my number.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions around the election, the calendar, things like that? We'll clean that up, and then that'll also go on the website as well, but we just need to clean it up.
Yeah.
But NISBA did, I will say NISBA did a really nice job with that. And then I do have an email from our law firm that confirmed everything that I shared with you today around the, our dates, just to make sure we're reading it the same way as well. Alrighty. All right, so we'll continue on now. The next part that's in your PowerPoint, starting on page 12, is just the priorities for budget inclusion. This is just all of the pieces from the strategic coherence plan. I'm not going to go through those. They're color coded for the first year, second year. Just as we go through and we've been discussing the budget, obviously we're aware of all of these different things. And obviously in these challenging budget times, we're trying to make sure we keep the rudder as deep as we can. And the plan is serving as one of those center lines to keep us on there. Obviously, as we head forward, this budget, the impact from the state is becoming a little bit clearer, although the first quarter review, which was supposed to be completed by May 1st, we've not received anything as of yet from the Department of Budget. There's really been no discussion with respect to the first quarter impact. So originally the way it was kind of said was it would come out like the first of the month, and then the legislature would have 10 days to respond and whatnot. There's nothing been released as of yet. At least we haven't seen anything about the first quarter. There was something about a week ago that they were talking about 8.2 billion in the first time through, but nothing official. That kind of came out in one of the press conferences, but there's really been nothing since. So work through the priorities on page 20.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Are we gonna have another meeting? We didn't really talk about that. We said something about you have down here to ratify the budget at May 12th meeting or schedule a special meeting on the 19th. Are we gonna talk about that or not?
Sure. I didn't know if you wanted to do it at the end or not. And either end works for me. My recommendation, and looking forward to hearing from you, would be at least get May 19th on the books and allow us to then get it posted as a meeting. That's my suggestion, but open for discussion. Great question. Thank you, Lynn, we should have done that.
It's okay. I agree with you. I think we need it.
Now that's the same day that we already have a board meeting. Do we have a board meeting on the 19th? Is that correct?
No, the 26th.
Okay, sorry.
We have a meeting on the 12th. Obviously, whatever comes out at the end of this meeting, we would work between this meeting and that meeting to do some refining and those kinds of things. And then per the direction of the board, you'll see a couple different options here at the end of the presentation. And then that'll give us some guidance and direction. But yes, it would be adding a special board meeting on the 19th because the 26th would be too late.
Okay. I just saw it in my calendar, so that's why I asked. For some reason, I've got in our Google Calendar, I've got Board of Ed the 19th, 6:30 to 7:30, and Wednesday, the 20th, 6 to 7. It could have been.
So I believe that would have been the original budget night. Believe it or not, that would have been the original budget night. Would have been Tuesday, and I believe then we would have had the ratification of the board vote that night.
I just didn't want to miss anything.
Yep, but you were absolutely right. I was like, wow, and then I'm like, that makes sense. That was actually when we would be doing the actual vote, was May 19th.
Okay, so yeah, 19th. I'm good with that then.
Okay. Other discussion? So Lynn and Fallon, anybody else? Robin?
I think it might make more sense to do it on the 19th in that it'll give us another week to possibly garner more information so that we have as up-to-date information regarding resources that may or may not come our way to help us with our budget decisions. So I would recommend, I agree with you, Brian. I think it would be smart to do it then. So we've heard from 1, 2, 3 of us. So you have a couple more people here, 3 more people to hear from.
I may not be available on the 19th, but if you do the meeting and I'm back, I will definitely pop in. I mean, if you do it at 3 o'clock, I'm definitely not available.
I'm fine.
Thanks, Dave.
The 19th is good for me.
All right. And then in the past, we've had Jean has worked on scheduling a time.
So let me ask this, Brenda, what would be a better time to try to include you, to be more inclusive?
Probably the later, like the 6-ish time. They have an appointment at 3 in Syracuse. I just don't know what time I'll get back.
Right. 6:30 might make more sense in that Mr. Crandall, this is his busy time of year. And he's not here to speak to that, but, trying to be sensitive to his schedule, I think 6:30 would be maybe more appropriate. Also might work better for members of the community that are essential workers and are going to work.
Makes sense.
6:30 works well for me, so.
Works for me.
I'm fine. That's good.
Okay. Lynn? Yep.
I think we're a go for 6:30 then.
Okay.
Thank you.
There we go. Wonderful. Does it feel good to have something checked off? That feels good. So thank you. The transportation, if we go to page 20, this is a screen that I think is, just goes to the priorities for the budget, includes also a reminder to us that we have this transportation variance cost, that we have each year right now. And then it also, it's in the back of our mind. We discussed at our last meeting how we're addressing that, but obviously it's a part of all of our thinking. It's not incorporated in the budget, but we need to think about it from the standpoint of a revenue standpoint. So obviously we're staying after it. I would like to see it left alone for another year. We'll see. We know it's supposed to come, but maybe with everything going on. So the next slide is slide 21. This is one where I think, if there's anything that's coming out of this budget process that we have to remind ourselves, obviously we have kids learning and teaching is happening in very different ways. So there's obviously that part, but we're also hearing more and more about some social, emotional, and behavioral types of things that are going on for kids. And I think, and for staff.
Excuse me, before we get too far on that, are we going to send something and ask for the transportation variance cost to be delayed?
Well, that's a good discussion to have. Let's have that discussion. I was thinking at the back of my mind that it's a great question. I have no problem if the board would want me to reach out to them to see if this is a year where they could waive that, or not. Obviously, they'd probably say we haven't had it for we haven't had to pay before. But I think it's an interesting one to say, listen, this is going to be a difficult year, although the state's also looking for revenues as well. Right. So what is the pleasure of the board? I mean, we've got the direction and we got the answer from them. We got the variance, but I have no problem reaching out to them and speaking to that office, as well as to our legislators that we work with as well, to see if they could be any assistance with that.
We have nothing to lose. Let's try it.
Can I have a show of hands if you want Brian to make that call?
1, 2, 3. Hey,
let's go.
Yeah.
Nick had 2.
One of them was for Tim.
Got it.
That's why I had two.
Tomorrow we will.
I figure he would agree. Thank you.
Yep, that's a great point, Nick. You can't, as Lynn just said, you can't get it if you don't ask, right? It's the worst thing they're going to say. No. All right. Let me go back here to the PowerPoint. So on page 21, I was just highlighting the social emotional. As we go through this budget process, you're going to hear things like Part 100 and what's required and what's not. Social emotional and behavioral supports, I think, are going to be some of the most important things, as we've had kids that are going to have been disengaged from being in a school setting, and with all the supports and all the different things that families may or may not be dealing with or have not. And when you think about that, we left here March 16th. If we engage on time, which we all hope we will, it could be in September. It could be almost 6 months between the time last time they stepped foot in schools. And so I think it's going to be a very important piece, and it's something we're known for here in Fulton, is the strength of our social, emotional, and behavioral supports. So I think trying to maintain those as whole as possible as we go through this, the better. So I'm going to continue on here. For some reason, switching gears here. All right. The next line is the 2020 state aid lines. Just a reminder, these are the lines distributed April 2nd. And we added a slide. This is really the state aid general fund lines. So it's actually where we're remembering that UPK is a very targeted line, 657, as well as, if you remember, the community school set aside at the bottom there. So the actual state aid to use in the general fund is $50,289,000. Kathy, do you want to add anything to that screen?
Sorry, I had to turn on my mic. No, I just wanted to make sure that we realize UPK's grant and falls in the special aid fund, so that when we go out for a vote, it's not included as part of the available state aid.
Yep. And if you take the pandemic, our subtotal was 49,563. This year it's 52. Or just to explain that at all, or?
Brian, I actually can't see both. Wait a second. I don't have the new PowerPoint.
Okay.
I just have the one from before.
So basically, it's the new state aid after adjustments and minusing out the UPK.
Right.
Okay.
So and then it just depends on what we get based on the CARES formula, if we get to keep all that or what's going to occur with that.
Right. So right now, is that fund we're seeing right there is has got the CARES in it or not?
It does. That's what that, Cuomo took out the pandemic
Right.
and then added back in the CARES. That's why it just showed those two lines.
Right. Okay.
So,
And then the next slide is the federal CARES restoration, and we're planning on that being zero. We're almost assured that that'll be zero, but we haven't seen anything as of yet. So we've been basing our budget on zero.
Can you explain why you expect there to be a zero, Brian, when the feds
Yeah, I mean, right now,
diverted that money to Title I?
so my understanding of the federal CARES, and Kathy, chime in, please, if, is that we got the federal CARES. He can take 40% back, if you will, and then he has to apply for a variance for the remaining 60%, is my understanding, through the federal government, through the Office of Education, so DeVos office at the federal level. And right now it's going to be interesting to see if the federal government grant those waivers. When I met with Ketco, Congressman Ketco, I brought up the fact that would be an area where I'd rather see those variances not, but then I believe that we would just see it taken out another part of the aid. So it's really here nor there, but I think that's the piece. And I think right now, I think he built it in there with the idea that we'll be back to this year's levels that we're at right now. So taking it all back puts us back at that level. Is that correct, Kathy?
yeah, I mean, he took away, what was it, 1.3 or whatever, but basically is backfilling it with the CARES money. So hopefully we'll be able to keep all the CARES money. That brings us back to basically the same level as the current year.
Right.
Very close.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that it wasn't going to be extra money.
Right.
No matter how it comes to us, if the CARES dollars makes it to us, it's not going to be extra money in any way, shape, or form. It's just going to help restore money.
Right.
What
It really
was that?
that funding.
Right.
Yep. On page 25 is the 9 years of the property tax cap. I always put that in there just to see, where we've been, what our trends have been each year. As you can see, each year we've had a little bit of an increase right along, with exception of 17-18, and our tax cap, if you remember, was a minus 1.74 that year. That was our maximum tax cap. So that was a year that it was a negative tax cap. In the other years, you can see we've gone to our max the last couple of years. Actually, since 16-17, we've gone to our maximum tax cap each year. And so what we've done is it represents about 58% of the permissible over 9 years. So it's just good information to have in your arsenal of information. The next slide just describes how the tax cap is calculated. This year is our tax cap at 2%, happens to be 2% in the Fulton City School District. As like last year was 2.69. So this year it's 2%. And that's the equivalent of $423,000. Also, the slide we always remind ourselves of is these are our fund balances from 6/30/16 through 6/30/19. So you can see that, and if you recall from previous meetings, we've maximized. We're doing well. Our unassigned fund balance, I believe, is right at the 4% or thereabouts. And then we're very close on our reserve fund balances as well. Kathy, anything you'd add to that sheet?
I think you did a great job. So, no, basically just, some of those monies are available to us. Some of those have legal restrictions. And so, not everything can be accessed. The 4% unassigned fund balance is available for use. Of course, we'll be, if we have to start paying the transportation penalty back this June, that would come directly from the fund balance.
When Kathy and I talked about this earlier, we've been talking about this, is how much, it's not really $11 million that's there. Would you say it's somewhere between $5.5 and $7 million?
Maybe a little bit less. It would depend on the 3.5 million tied up in the employee benefit accrued liability. And
Yep.
that's only to be used for compensated absences at the point when people retire. So we may only use, could use 300,000 or 400,000 of that a year. And I'm pretty certain that we would not be able to touch that because that's one of the areas that the comptroller will often come in and look at. So that's not something we can just decide, gee, we're going to use that money for something else. There would have to be some act of law, some change in the law to allow us to use it. So that would be one of them. Same thing with what's in the capital reserve now. After we've transferred money for the project, we do have about 300,000, I believe, that we put in there. So that's not accessible either. So it'd be more like things we'd have to look at the tax tertiary and decide that it wasn't needed. So it would come down that some of the funds are available, but a little bit harder to get to them. It would take board action and legal action.
So I guess I just think it's important, you know, if you weren't involved in this and you were looking in from the outside, you'd say, gee, it looks like we have $11 million in our savings accounts, if you will. And in fact, just because you may get those kinds of questions as board members, you know, how come there's $11 million? What's the problem? And in fact, that's really 11. It's kind of like 2% is not 2%. 11 million is not 11 million. In fact, what's accessible is riding closer into that $5 to $6 million range. And we've taken into consideration, obviously, the transportation piece as well as we're thinking about those things. So I just wanted to put that out there because a lot of people might say, and there's been, I was in a conference or somewhere along the way. I have so many of these, like trying to remember when, but there was a conversation where somebody had said at a higher level that, oh, the state has an $8.02 billion gap. And if you take all the fund balance and reserves in all the schools, it's $8.02 billion. It's not as easy as that. And but it was an interesting that was said in some forum somewhere. It wasn't at a local level. So it's just something to be aware of. I think as board members, it may be the kind of question, and anytime, just have any individual that has those kinds of questions can call Kathy or I, and we can help walk them through that. The next slide just talks about things I added on this one, that living in with a new normal, the COVID-19 and the impacts on New York State and federal is just exorbitant. And I don't think, you know, it's not real until I think we see the dollar figures, but we keep talking about it and hearing about it. I think it's going to become much more real. And things are starting to open up, and that there's so many positive things that we see kind of glimpses of it coming through. But the simple fact of the matter is that there's a $13.3 billion issue right now, and the governor has indicated it's $61 billion, I think, by 2013 or 24, I believe. So this is not a short-term issue. So as we're developing these budgets, we have to be thinking about not only 2021, but also thinking about 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24. And I was just talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about, if you really think about our budget here, we had all those issues in 8-9, 7-8-9, and we didn't get our fund balance and reserves back to their limits and getting them nice and solid until the end of 2019. That was 10 years to accomplish, and it was a lot of great work by boards of education and the administrations that were here over the last 10 years, and really trying to work hard at being fiscally responsible. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but 10 years to recover from something is pretty amazing. And what you're recovering from is a pretty heavy impact in a district that's the third poorest in the entire 3-county area. I mean, and so it's something to be said about, we went from I think it was moderate susceptible stress back in 16, and Superintendent Lynch had done a nice job getting us to there, and then somehow we've ended up off those lists. I believe we were less than 10%, around 8%. We're really in a good spot, probably as good as you could be going into this kind of situation. So, but this kind of situation can eat up things very quickly. The next line just talks a little bit more budget preparation. Some more pieces in there. I'm not going to go through them. There are no changes from the last slides. Now, if you move to number 33, page 33, I want to preface, remember what we talked about before the meeting. Over the next couple of slides, especially on the third slide we're going to talk about, I have not had conversations with specific staff or things like that. These are, I probably should have just put the FTEs in, and I did not. This is, these are where we're at right now. There's still some fluidity, in what we would be doing. So I would ask if you have any questions, not to specifically, if you want to talk about FTEs, that's one thing, but not the specific positions. And I had talked about that before the meeting. So thank you for that in advance. Just to let you know where we're at on page 33, that's the February 4th, 2020. We started off, that was just your natural roll forward budget. If you remember, that was using 3.25% salary increases, 1% on non-salary, and 7% for benefits. That brought us to a budget that was $2.4 million higher than we are in 1920. If you move on to the next slide, that brings us where we were at the next slide was on April 7th. And we were 1.4 million over budget. We had brought it down $1 million, $1,055,000. How do we do that? We reduced the substitute line. What we're going to do is not pull teachers out for trainings as much. It's one of the things that we've actually heard in the past. We're pulled out a lot out of classrooms, things like that. So this is a year where we're able to really try to refine. We have to get creative. I think we've learned a lot in this pandemic with respect to learning online and doing online meetings. In fact, we're thinking about doing collaboration days differently than we've done in the past. And you'll notice as you ratify the calendar, the instructional calendar next Tuesday, we actually have taken those collaboration days out because there was discussion with different stakeholder groups, and that really works out well. But now you can just leave your classroom and you'll be able to do your meeting right online and meet with your other teachers at your grade level across and do a collaboration if we want to do a cross collaboration. It just lends itself. We've learned so much, and the comfortability that we're getting as we're watching and hearing how our PLCs are just evolving. And we're PLC district since 2000, I believe, in 5 or 6. So, to see we're still growing and evolving in that is terrific. Salaries.
Brian, won't that still have a budgetary impact, though, if teachers are giving up time elsewhere? I get we wouldn't be taking them out of the classrooms and paying for a sub, but wouldn't that add time to their day, perhaps? Or I can't imagine that anyone would be asked to do that voluntarily.
What we've been doing with those, it's a great question. What we've been doing with those is they would say our PLCs run, for example, at 2:15, 2:30, and then they work till the 3:40 or 3:30. So that's where we're picking up. It's not outside their day is what we've been doing right along. So what we're reducing is the times where we pull them out and we say, now you're going to go over to the education center and spend the day. We're going to reduce all of the trainings that you leave the building and go out and do this or that. We're going to try to minimize all those pieces and focus on that. Ms. Connors, would you add to anything to that? Am I answering that?
No, that's correct. We're just looking at how we use time within the day differently, Dave. And we're trying to see how we can use even that dismissal time from 3 to 3:45, how using, like we are all on right now, using that as the platform to have them discuss issues that may be of.
Yeah, within the school day, within the confines of the contract. So again, I think it just takes, I think anything can be done, but I think it's an area where that we can do some good work. And what I found is short meetings actually sometimes do better than these all day pieces. I think we all learned that sitting in these meetings like this now. I find we get done quicker and we get more pointed done.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry. So after that time, the 2:15, you would just use like a TA or an aide who's already in the classroom?
Which is what we've been doing right along. Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. All right. Thank you.
Yep. The next part, B, was salaries based on estimated actuals, contractual raises, included breakage around retirements, resignations, so on and so forth. That's a decrease of 338. Operations and maintenance was decreased by 484, including utilities, things like that. And Kathy felt comfortable in that area. If you want to add anything to that, Kathy. And then we moved the BOCES technology line to admin, and that actually resulted in a decrease of 80,000.
Yeah, basically for the technology piece, I removed any cushion that I had in there. And so that the net decrease, this had more to do with just where things get coded, and there were certain items that had to fall under the administrative portion of the budget, not program. And I tried to scale back where we had kept a little extra. And in the operations and maintenance, we pared down any extra that we might have been carrying in utilities. Looked at with the capital project coming on board and the energy performance contract especially, we felt that some of the contractual expenses, repair expenses, may be going down in the operations and maintenance budget because of that. So we thought if there's any year that we're going to scale back there, we could do it now. And I've talked to Al about it, and he's on board. And I believe we can do that.
Yeah. And on B, the salaries and estimated actuals, that's retirements, resignations, things like that. So there are FTEs or full-time equivalents associated in that 338. So just to kind of give you an idea of what's in there. We just didn't break them out to say it was this, and this, but that's all of those things together. Now this next page on 35, this is what I talked about prior to the meeting, that, if I could go back and do this slide, I wouldn't have identified a couple things. But this is how we now, on May 5th, we brought it down another $600 or $581,000 to this point. And as you can see, we've got some FTE equivalents that we were able to reduce. And right now, the way this is designed is there's no, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes when we go through some of the options, is the plan is we always try to focus on resignations, retirements, and repurposing when we can. And the focus always, and I realize that we focus on how can we maintain our permanent staff and not see people that aren't going to be able to be part of our district anymore. And we have a lot of replacement teachers in positions, things like that. Replacements are long-term substitutes when teachers may be doing other assignments. And so when they return, there's positions there. So by looking at those, as well as another FT that's a vacancy at the end of this year, along with a little bit more retirement breakage since that last meeting. So at the end of the last meeting, you asked kind of how did we get there on that million? That's why we provided that on that last slide. And then this is how we've gotten from 1.4 million down to 831. This is how we came up with the other 581 so far. And then you go down a little further on another position that's going to be vacant at the end of the school year, a 0.6. And then benefits and ERS and Social Security down a number, 56,000. And then decrease 50,000 from miscellaneous salaries covered by community school, things like that. That brings us down to where we're at right now. Where are we at? On page 36. On page 36, we're looking at remaining 831,000 over budget at this moment in time. And so there are a couple of options I want you to ponder, and we'll have some discussion. So, and this isn't A being first, B second, it just happened to be the order. Option A is tax cap of 2% that we would pursue. That would bring 423,000, and then we would use reserves and fund balance for the remainder. So 414, that gives us a balanced budget of 0. So that's the first option that we're at. The second option, if it's on page 37, would be option B, which is, again, we got the 831, 350 over budget, having a tax cap that we would go for 423, the 2%, and then we would make further reductions of 414,000 with no use of reserves and fund balance. Some districts are choosing to do that in anticipation if we get even further reductions from the state, then they're looking at it that way. The advantages of us waiting till May 19th allows us to get a better feel for what are those numbers going to look like. in the plan from the governor. And then finally, option C is the most open-ended option, where the board could say, you know, Brian, we feel comfortable with a 1% tax cap, and that would be half of the 423, which is roughly 212 and a half, or 211 and a half, 211,000. And then further reductions, if you take 211, that would mean we'd have to find another 600,000 if we max there, and none out of reserves, or a combination of those different three. You know, I would never say we should use more than 414 out of the fund balance. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that would be the max that we should use out of there, not knowing what's on the horizon. You know, if we get better numbers on the 15th, then so be it. So, Robin, I'm going to put my face back on here so I can see everybody, not looking at everything. So that's where we're at right now. You know, I think that, you know, there are a couple different options to ponder there. And I'll share one other thing. I apologize that I want to just go over. I want to ensure you that we have a process in place. And this would be something I'd want to discuss more in we'd have to have a little bit more executive conversation. I want to talk with Robin about how to do that. But we have a step process that we have in place. So let me describe it. So step one, you've already seen part of this, which is we've reduced some different types of positions to get us down that 556. There are some other pieces on there. So the first option really maintains program and services with streamlining. It's got some staff reductions, but it's done through retirement and attrition and moving things around. So in other words, you're not doing any furloughing, right? The step two, if they came in and said, okay, we need to go further, if the board said we want to go further, step two would be adjustments to some programs and services, which we would obviously bring to you, driven by Part 100 requirements. And we would go over those with you. But Part 100 are those mandated requirements by the state of New York, and our strategic coherence plan goals we would affiliate with that. That would result in some reduction in staff in addition to retirements and attrition. And then step three, if we ever had to get there, and, you know, worst case scenarios, I've heard, you know, there was some pieces out there, you know, people are talking, you know, 10 to 20% reductions in education, which would be absolutely devastating. Then you have to go into the most radical, which is Part 100 only, which are those Part 100 requirements, nothing else outside of that, staff reductions, you know, all of the different types of reductions, reconfigurations, trying to do business differently, trying to preserve priorities, program integrity. That's where you're cutting to such bare bones that you're just trying to provide as quality and experience as you can for kids. So, you know, we've got, what we have is a stepped kind of approach where we've got different types of things underneath each one of those steps. And as you can see, it's try to maintain as whole as possible, then try to pair and mainstream, you know, streamline as much as possible. And then there's that third piece, which is when you got to go bare bones and try to do the best you can. So Robin.
So Brian, if I were to explain this to a community member, option C would be losing a significant amount of program, and mostly anything what we could call the extras outside of the core.
Yeah. So option C. If we had to go, option C is if the board said, not really. The step three, like you're describing, would be if they came in and said, we're taking $5 million from the Fulton City School District. If you look at our $50 million that we get in state aid, and they said, we're taking 10% of $50 million, that's $5 million that we'd have to find or come up with that we wouldn't be receiving. That would be an example of that.
Let me say this differently then. So the only real extras we could count on would be anything grant money driven. Those, as long as the grant money came, we'd still have those grant programs.
Yeah.
Programs that are not grant programs, which would get into things like clubs, music, athletics. Those aren't grant driven.
No.
So I'm just saying, we've been here before with the community, and I don't want to I just want people to understand that's what going that deep is going to cut into those things. And that does bother people. And I understand that, rightfully so.
Right.
That said, I don't know. I don't think any of us know at this point in time what we're going to be allowed to do anyways come September because of distancing. So we still have that's up in the air.
Mhm.
But I know that that's going to be significant cuts to things that people hold near and dear in the community, and in particular, our students, many things that impact them. Whereas option B, when you say streamline, we're probably going, I'm guessing you're going to look at things like activities where there's very few students.
Yeah, I may have, let me re-describe here a second. Let me just walk through that because I think I may have created some confusion.
All right.
So on the first one, let's
Okay.
just go back through them quick. Option A is right now, we've gotten it down to $831,000. And option A, the first one we're discussing, is to go for a tax cap of 2% and $423,000. And then from reserves and fund balance, $414,350. So nothing beyond what I've already shared today. So then we're set. Option B, if the board said, gee, we're comfortable doing the 2% of creating 2% tax cap, but we're not comfortable using any fund balance or reserves. We want to keep that zero. We don't want to touch our fund balance or reserves at all. Brian, go back with your team between now and the 12th and find another $414,000. And we have a list of try A, B, and or step 1, step 2, and step 3. Then, so that's option B. Option C is if the board said, okay, Brian, we've decided that to make this easy, let's make the math easy. 0%, we don't want to do any tax cap at all. We want 0. So that would be $0. We don't want to take anything out of reserves and fund balance. And we want you to, that means all of the reductions, you need to find another 813,000 reductions. So that's what that would mean. Or the board could say 1% on the first one, which is $211,000. And then we don't want any reserves and fund balance. So that means you need to find 600,000 more in reductions. So that one is with the flexibility, really giving guidance to say, if we're not comfortable with the tax cap at 423, if we are, okay. And then Brian, we're comfortable with you using reserves and fund balance, or Brian, you and your team, we'd like you to go back and fill and come back to us next week with recommendations about how you would close a gap of $414,000. So that's really the discussion of A, B, and C. Then the other piece we have is I wanted to share with you is that we have a list that we've put together of which you already saw $556,000, how we got here today. There's a couple more things on that list. And then if we had to go deeper, here's the second column of a second kind of a little bit deeper. Now we're hitting more program. We're hitting more people, right? You got that section. And then finally, if it comes out beyond everything and it says, now you're way out there, you got to find $3 million or $2 million. Then there's those more radical way out here. That's where you're really looking at all different kinds of things from, programming, from the organization of your district, collective bargaining, which Dave would appreciate. I mean, obviously that's an area that always comes up. All of those things become, so it's a graduated system. There's A, B, and then there's the other piece. So again, without knowing the governor's numbers and the numbers that we're going to have state aid wise, we have to have this graduated system so that we have a reference point of where to go. So did that help?
Well, but Brian, I think though it would be remiss not to say that if we go with option C, without a doubt, we're going to be looking at programs that matter to people. I don't know how deep we go, but we're going to go into those programs.
Yeah,
we don't do kind of money.
Absolutely right. We'll go beyond the 831, and you said to me, Brian, we're going to go for the tax cap, but we want 414 or we want another 500. That's when we start getting closer and we get closer. I don't have much left. between and moving into phase 2.
And I know that, so that's why I want to say that. That's our reality. These numbers look big and it looks like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, we know, working with the budget all the time, we don't have a lot of extra. There isn't a lot of extra here. So it is going to get into meat and potatoes. And I want to be very honest about that. Other thing is, we could even do A, and at the end of the day, when those quarter reports come in from the state, those quarter financials, even doing A to save program, I don't know that that's a guarantee. There's any guarantee that we save a program all year long, because we have an unknown that we've never had before, in my experience, that we're going to be having our revenues reviewed and changed possibly, which I only remember one other time in my experience where the revenue was taken away that was promised us. And we run fairly lean here in this community, in this district, and it's going to cause pain. That's all. I just want to be upfront.
Yep.
I don't want people to say, well, nobody said, we didn't say. We need to say.
Brian,
we need to be very honest.
Brian, what also, the question that I have is, how sustainable, even if A were a possibility, and as Robin described, if our state aid were predictable and at the level we would anticipate, how sustainable is that year to year? Because I know that you're forecasting out a few budgets.
Yep.
And I mean, to continue to imagine that we would have to then next year also draw from reserves, how long, or have you looked to see how long we could do that with coming into program?
Yeah, we've talked about that. That's a good question. I think and Kathy, chime in, but I think if you look at it this way, if we even stayed at 0, the state said next year you're going to be able to stay again, the same amount that we, have. When we roll forward budgets, we know it costs us right around $2 million when you roll with the contracts, just normal 3%, all of those things in the roll. Eventually, as you said, you're going to have to take more and more. So I would say, Kathy, please chime in.
Well, I was going to say, it's really close to about $1 million what contractual increases cost. And then you have the increases in your benefits, and TRS and ERS are, starting to climb a little bit. Hopefully what's gone on in the market, I mean, it might be a couple of years before something hits now, or maybe it will recover fast enough that it won't make that big of a difference. But both those rates have gone up this year, so that takes a little bit of a bigger piece of the pie. We just experienced this year not a good healthcare year. It's kind of sad, but COVID, the pandemic is actually helping to lower our healthcare costs right now, unless someone from the covered by our plan gets sick because of it, but because people aren't going in for elective type procedures. And I just saw about the lowest weekly bill come through today. It's usually 150, 200,000 every time we pay it. And I think it was below 50,000 this time. So, I mean, again, $1 million plus an increase on benefits. So probably it'd be hard to, even if we didn't consider, cost of living increases for inflation for other areas, and just stuck with the existing collective bargaining agreements, we're going to be looking at probably 1.4 million on each year as an increase. So until you decide you want to do something with the unions, I'm not sure, you're going to be faced with that piece. And then you'd be digging into the reserves, because the undesignated fund balance is going to disappear quickly.
Well, and I would be thinking of our health fund. These elective surgeries are going to be getting pushed. So even for our budget for next year, we're going to start seeing those. And then
Right.
COVID-19 is expected to come back in the fall, and we don't know what that's going to look like yet. So we'll be also experiencing, hopefully not, but could possibly be experiencing some rising healthcare costs heaven forbid any of our staff members get sick and end up in the hospital.
Absolutely.
Those costs are dramatic.
Can I ask what the 2% tax cap was going to look like to a resident in Fulton?
Sure.
We did, Brian, I don't know where those forms are right now. We did an example.
Oh, I thought we shared at the last board meeting. What it is, Lynn, it's a good question. I actually had it because I think Fallon asked it actually a meeting or two ago. And we had it. It's for a $100,000 home at 2%, it's $50. It's like 49 something, I believe. So it's $50 on a $100,000 home, Lynn.
Okay. I knew we went over it, but I don't remember what it was. But I know somebody's going to ask me.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And, I think that, one of the things that a lot of districts, and based on the poll, it looks like 4 other districts in our county are doing tax increases, and 4 are still reflecting. So, at this point in time, and that doesn't count us one way or the other. I know what there are. I know that there's a lot of different points of view on that, and it's out. Last year's tax cap brought us in, I don't remember what it was. I think it was 418,000, whatever it was, each year forever. And I think that's the piece we have to remember, that it's something that continues and gives us a base to work with. I think it also, I also understand that this community and all of the communities in this area and across the country are dealing with things financially they've never dealt with before. And so I understand the delicate balance. I also understand that our schools and our programs are the safe haven for 3,200 kids each and every day. And, one of the things that I will give credit to Ms. Parkhurst. We were in a meeting yesterday and it really resonated with me. A lot of things resonate, but this resonated. She goes, Brian, kids with the most off the chart academically, they're doing so wonderful. Schools, a great place for them. To the kids that school is a struggle. It's every day. We're seeing it with every kid from both ends, and everybody in our are having trouble right now. They're struggling with a lot of different things, and it really resonated. It reminds us that every student brings with them uniqueness, and that uniqueness that they bring to our schools makes us special. It makes our culture. But our schools, for many of them, provide that consistency and that safe place for them. So.
Absolutely. The other question I have is about the fund balance and the reserves. So many people don't understand that. I know you just explained a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And we have talked about it. I have for so many years, and I myself was ignorant of what that meant years ago until we talked about it over and over. I think that needs to be explained more fully.
Okay.
So people understand exactly what that is, because they're going to say to us, just use that extra money, instead of not knowing what that is all about.
I would also say, Linda, that's a great point. A lot of the programs that are grant funded, those are the first ones that people come to us and ask us about. If we could have information out there about programs that are grant funded, for the public reference.
Ms. Connors, in our grant report, we can pull the grant report out. That has a listing of all our grants, correct?
Absolutely. And there's a narrative that we can make sure. I think the narrative is probably the bigger part. And I also think, back to what you talked about, Brian, we probably need to go back and educate our community on Part 100 requirements and but Robin, back to your point, when you were speaking, I was thinking back to if we didn't have any, if we ended up in a really bad spot, what is required?
I think that's such a good point, because I think people don't always think in terms of what we're dealing with. They're only thinking in terms of what is being taken away. And so if they know what we have to work with in their terms, I'm just laying that one out, it's more understandable for them. And I think they would work with us better.
Yep.
I agree. And some of the things like those categorical aid, like textbook money, I think sometimes people don't understand that there's funds that come in that have to go certain places. And then there's other funds that we have, you know, we can be a little more judicious in the way we spend. But even like, you know, sometimes community members don't understand, and it's just because they haven't had the experience that family consumer science is still a requirement for
Right.
Part 100 at the middle level. But that's not always things like that aren't understood, that we just need to make sure we educate. I think that's a great point, Lynn.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I was one of those people years ago that didn't understand any of it. I mean, I've been educated here recently, but
yeah, you just identified one of the things that actually wakes me up at night a bit lately, is that we've always had a challenge communicating and helping people understand our budget in the first place. And this is very different. Ballots going into the home. You're going to be looking at something you really don't understand. So in our budget brochure may be the only thing that they look at. Or they may, you know, when we tape our budget form, really thinking about how do I not talk so much and provide bulleted points. You know,
you do a
just
good job.
I never talk a lot, right? But bulleted points for those individuals, because what we realize is, and my team reminds me a lot, is that less is more, and making sure that the points are very clear. And you hit on the things that we were talking about. People don't understand fund balance. They don't understand, you know, Part 100. They don't understand what we're required. They don't understand the fund balance and reserves and how come you can't spend $11 million. It says there's $11 million. So I think those are pieces that I'm really worried about, because when you hear, I thought the number was 11,000, it's 8,500. So thank you, Gene. With that, but our average number of voters has been somewhere between 550 and around 850 over the last 4 to 5 years. We used to have 1,200 in the heyday. There was a study done by NISBA last year, and I believe at one time we had 1,200 votes. But when we're talking 8,500 homes, it's going to be interesting. Some people are just going to look at it, they won't even do it. So we could have 600 ballots come in, or we could have 6,000 ballots come in. And so it's going to be an interesting time. Gene, it's okay. So, but yeah, and I worry, I want people to make informed votes, I guess is the most important. I want them to understand what they're voting for. And I don't want them voting no because they don't understand. If they vote no because they think that that it's not a good budget, then so be it. But if they didn't have the information, then, you know, I feel bad for them that they didn't make an informed decision or couldn't make an informed decision. So it's a unique challenge, but we're going to rise to the occasion and try to figure that out. So between now and the next meeting, Robin, do you want, I guess my question is, my team obviously going to continue to work on things and look at guidance and all those pieces. Is there anything you want us to do between now and the 12th as far as you want us pursuing option A, or do you want us doing A and then working on some further refinements, which is really what B is? Yes.
So Brian, let me just ask my colleagues. I mean, each one of you I want them to weigh in very clearly on what they need, because that's really what you're asking. So I'm going to start with Mrs. Abelgore. No, not you. Okay. How about Mrs. Cooper?
Sure. So my personal opinion is I don't believe option A is not attainable, but it's going to be attainable for long term. If we're looking at several years where we're going to have to cut from the budget, I don't know if it's sustainable. That's the word I was looking for. So I would like more information definitely on option B. I think looking at the budget where it's coming from, pretty sure that with this $13 billion deficit from the state, cuts are going to be made. Let's start here, at least looking at it for next meeting. If we did have to cut, where would we start?
Okay. Mr. Cordone.
I do agree, which is why I asked the question with Mrs. Cooper regarding the sustainability for option A, but I don't know that we're going to be able to avoid using reserves. So I'm just wondering, I think I'm in the same place as she is with saying we're really kind of planning for the possibility that even if we were to choose A, we know that the revenue from the state aid is not going to be what we expect. So we're probably going to be forced, as you had mentioned, Robin, with making some decisions mid-year to cut things. And it seems like we might better prepare for that possibility, that reality in advance. And I think I'm in the same place as Fallon.
Okay. Mr. DeJarme.
Nick, could you turn your microphone on, please?
No, I wasn't making sense anyway, so. All right, let's say like with option C, if we do the 2% tax cap, and then the further reductions, can we get a list of what things would be considered to be cut and what each one cost? Does that make sense?
Yes, that actually.
My mic on.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of where what I would say is if so far, if the charge was, that you wanted, the charge was for us to come back with another 414,000 or 800,000, whatever the case may be, that we would bring that to you. Obviously, we would have some more discussion, kind of a heads up what we're doing, and we could actually then show you in the step thing that I'm talking about. We have those things already kind of identified, and we know what the dollar figures are with those. It's just a question of, as you move forward, people get more anxious, and in a time of fear, anxiety with all the COVID and everything else, we want to make sure that this is rolled out and it is shared and communicated in the best way possible, so people aren't surprised. And even with that, people will be surprised, because I'm not sure that in our world, if we haven't been the ones experiencing not having that paycheck come in, like some of our families in our community, they don't know that, or relying on our food service to provide them sustenance. So I think I understand your question. We could obviously come back next week and say, this is how we would get another 200,000, 400,000, 600,000. And we could come and share that easily with the board, because we've been working on that prioritized list, knowing that, and you heard me say, we've even thought about what if the governor came up with $2 or $3 million. And in some districts, and our district superintendent from BOCES recently said, there are districts that will become insolvent because they're in such susceptible stress already. And now this hits them, they will become insolvent. And that's scary if this gets as deep as some. And that's why that May 15th report, I hope, gives us some more direction. But the scariest thing about this whole thing is we are 71 or 72% people in education or in our district. It might even be a little higher than that, 74%. And we don't have much to cut outside the people. And that's where it becomes very reality. And our kids need, we don't have our people because we just thought it's great to have them. They're there because we need them for our kids. And so every one of those reductions would be extremely hard in any part of our organization.
Mrs. Lyon. Oh, Nick, did you have more?
No, that's fine. The first thing, if we're looking at a list of cuts, people wouldn't be the first thing on my list. I'd be looking at programs.
Well, a lot of I think that's where we're going, and that's what we've tried to do. The programs really, all of our programs have people associated with them. I mean, I think that's what we have to remember. So, and again, I'm not going to name any programs, I'm not going to do that. But what I would say is, I don't know of any programs that don't have a human element to every one of them, because our kids all need supervision and guidance. There's nothing we do that doesn't have supervision and guidance associated with it.
Okay.
And to get to the kind of money you're talking about, you're talking salaries. That's the bottom. I've done this a long time, and we can't get to this money without salaries. So it's either more revenue or it's salaries. I wish there was an in between, but again, we run pretty lean in this district, and we don't buy what we don't need. So we don't have a budget that's padded with money for equipment.
Right. If you look at Robin makes a great point. If you look at from the February to the April, and the April till now, we closed that gap over $1 million. So we already went for a lot of the stuff that wasn't people, breakage on retirements, all those kinds of things were all things not. So we went from 2.4 million to 1.4 million. Now we got it down to 831 without, we've had to pare it back and try. But as you said, Nick, that's where we obviously look first.
Mhm.
And the other piece is, as Dave brought up earlier, we're planning, we have to wrap our head as well as Fallon around 2 or 3 years from now, because you can't just take it all in the first, but it's about sustainability, but it's also about maintaining integrity of nice whole programs for kids as much as possible to give them those balanced programs that we need.
Okay.
Yeah, and Brian, let me be clear. Like, I know that no one wants to cut programming. Like, that's not what anybody wants. We're here to serve our students and our business partners and our community. But if our government funding is cut drastically, we don't have a choice in this. We have to make these tough decisions. It's not any decisions that we want.
Absolutely. And, and again, if I haven't, I absolutely agree with everybody saying. I mean, there are districts, there are some that most districts are going to the zero, and they're planning on what it would be flat. So in other words, they've taken care of all the rollover, everything like that, and trying to get back to the 0 point, like where we're at with funding right now with state aid. The only thing we control is the local share. Obviously, that's the tax cap share. And then anything beyond that, you're right, it's going to hit hard. And, the governor's been very clear that, and he brought it up again today. He was talking about education. I caught the very end of it in the question and answer section, but talking about the impacts on education and the need for federal aid. And unfortunately, the political aspects that are happening right now, the political nature that's going on, and it's unfortunate. Education is a part of that right now. And so, that's a piece. And so hopefully our elected officials at the at the federal level will help us. I think if there's anything we're all trying to do is be efficient and responsible with every nickel and every resource that we have.
I have a question. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Lynn.
As far as using the reserves and the fund balance, why do we have to use that number? Can we use part of it? I mean, you've got a certain number down there. Can we?
And the reason why that was there is I just took the half of we said the tax cap, and then that's what the remainder was. Mm-hmm. You could say we want to use 100,000. Okay, Brian, fine. Then we want you to go back and do 700. We might say, Brian, let's aim for 0 out of fund and reserves. This year, our current budget we're in right now, we use 0 fund balance and reserves to balance our budget. And we shared, yeah. So yeah, it can change.
Less and do some cuts. I mean.
Yep. Which is C. Actually, option C was that same thing. It really gives that flexibility. If you said 0 tax cap, then we want further, and we want 0 from fund and balance and reserves. That means we want 831,000 in more reductions.
No, my thought is we use part of the fund balance or reserves, and then use the tax cap, and then you're right. I guess what you said was correct. And then
there's so much flexibility. C is really the flexible one for the board to say, hey, Brian and team, we want you to focus on 250,000 out of reserves and fund balance, and go with the rest. Robin.
I just want to say again about reserves and fund balance with regard to sustainability. If you're using reserves and fund balance, you've only got another year or two. You don't have the sustainability over the long haul for program.
Mhm.
So again, when we set people to work to try to find a balanced budget, I don't know how much you want to depend on those items. And the other thing is we will not have money for a long time to rebuild those. So if you have an emergency, well,
Right.
there's
Right.
nothing there for emergency, I guess. So I just needed to say that again. I want to be crystal clear. When you go to reserves and fund balance, you think that I call them one shots.
Yep.
Maybe 2 shots. If you're really lucky, maybe you get 3, but you're not getting more than 3 shots at those accounts. Probably not 3, but 3 would be the maximum. We've done a good job. And as Brian said, it takes a good 10 years to rebuild. And that's only if the state and federal government get healthy and their priorities change. So I just want to caution you folks, as well as I would want the community to realize that maybe for a year, maybe 2, but I really don't see those as fixing the problem. The problem is much bigger than our reserves and fund balance.
Mhm.
But I'm going to go to Mrs. Abelgore to weigh in because she hasn't had a chance.
Sorry, there was a lot of noise in my background when you called my name the first time. So, as always, doing this budget thing gives me great anxiety. I appreciate how you guys have all talked about, using the reserves, because I too was thinking along the lines of Lynn, is why couldn't we use a small amount? But it does make sense to try to figure out for sustainability where we're coming from future down the line. I have to say that I would have to go with where can we really make further reductions without truly hurting our students. So I mean, for me, it's looking like option B, but I don't know. That's why I don't make the budget.
So I think as everybody get a chance what I've captured here and thinking, think about our current budget that we're in. We didn't balance it using any reserves or fund balance. We were able to bring it down, and we've had a history, even though we built it in 2 years ago and 3 years ago, we never touched it. And now here we are, and we've actually increased, we underspent our budgets. And so we've increased our reserves and our fund balance. So, what I'm hearing you, and all you have to say is no, next time, if we come the 12th and we can share with you, how do we get down another 414, that leaves the tax cap. And then 414, I guess my question then would be, are we comfortable with the 2% tax cap, or do I need to go further at this point in time? Or are we comfortable with the 2% tax cap? And then we come back on Tuesday next week with further information for you to reflect upon on how we could further, beyond what you've already seen so far, how would we add another 414,000? We would go to our list and we would come to you and share what that would look like. And then in a good way, being a small cities, we actually have the advantage of having another week to be able to refine and see if the governor gives us anything last minute that we can use to adjust, because we may find out that we look okay flat, or we may find out that, we got to find another million. And then that'll help us with that. So I think it's a good idea that everybody has. It can't hurt us to get down, so we have that information, so what does it look like if we go to 0, as far as nothing out of fund balance and reserves, in anticipation that we may be below 0, flat.
So do you want to know if we support the 2% tax cap? Is that what your question is?
I think for me, 2 things are important. One, just to lock in what's the tax cap number we're going to work with. And then I hear very clearly, and I think it's a good decision, is to say, Brian and team, please come back a week from now, and how would we get down that remaining 414,000? And if you say it's 1%, then we'd be saying, okay, Brian, 600,000 you need to bring us, and if it's 0, it would be 800,000.
I mean, I personally think we have to go to the 2. I don't like it, but I think we have to do the 2%. So that's where I'm shooting for.
Me
I
too.
agree also. I don't like it either, but it's going to be helpful.
I don't think anybody's going to be comfortable, but I think we have to. And the reason I believe we have to is because there was a time many years ago we didn't do that, and then there was an adjustment made in
Big.
the tax. Let me think. I'm trying to think of the word I need. In the assessments, and people saw hundreds of dollars increase in 1 year, one tax year, and that's too much for people to sustain. So I am all for a little bit at a time. People can kind of work it through in their budget and figure it out, but I don't want to put us in a spot, or a future board in a spot, where all of a sudden the cap is a lot more money. It's going to cost a lot more money, and you have to have it because we've lost our other revenues and we need the money just to meet Part 100s, so.
Brian, can you reiterate the dollar amount going to the cap would increase the average home of 100,000, if that was the number that you used?
Yeah, my memory serves me correct. For $100,000 home, it's $50.
Brian, I just looked it up. It's 50.5 cents per thousand. So if it's assessed at 100,000, and if they have the star, which I know has changed a little bit, but it's still worth about 30,000 off your assessment. So you'd be looking at more like $35 per year as an increase on a house assessed at 100,000. So 200,000.
Okay.
200,000 would be higher because you only have the 30 off. So a 200,000 might be like $85.
Thanks.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Hold your hand up if you want the mic.
I have one question to ask.
Yes.
Not pertaining to the budget, but somebody asked me, can I ask it or no?
I think you can ask anything you want, President. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Why is the tract, somebody wanted to know why the track is taped off.
Because part of when we did what we found was, unfortunately, people were going down and using it and not using social distancing. We had a lot of kids that were going down there, so we closed that off.
That's what I thought, but someone asked the question, called me up and
No,
asked.
it's a great question. I had another board member ask me that question, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right?
Brenda?
3 weeks ago, Brenda, yeah.
All right, somebody asked me that, so I thought I'd get that
Great
clarified.
question. Yeah.
Brian, do you need anything else from the board?
No, so just in summary, we'll schedule a meeting for May 19th at 6:30 p.m. Right? Is that what we came for, a special board, just to get on the books? We will come to the board meeting on May 12th with recommendations on $414,000 to bring us down to zero, meaning we'd be using nothing from reserves or fund balance. And I got yellow stickies. And then we're going to be, as we think about things and think about how do we present at our budget forum on May 26th, is that how do we really help to explain more fund balance, grant funded programs, Part 100, categorical aids, all those kinds of things to help people understand better.
Yes.
I think I captured that, right?
I think so. I think you did well. You did well.
Okay.
Okay, if that's it, would someone move resolution 1.03?
Move it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Hey, Brian, can we get the communication out, like the 100s and the green and everything, maybe via Facebook sooner, just to keep public aware to help answer any questions that we have?
Yeah, we'll start putting those things together and get them posted up.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Full time. Yep. Okay. All right, are we all set, Ms. Griffin?
All those in favor, raise your hand, please. I have one. Can I 2 hands? Fallon, I can't see a hand. Dave, I don't see a hand. Nick, I got 3 hands.
My hand's up.
Fallon, I've got Fallon. Dave, I think you're froze. Are you a yes?
I must be frozen.
Yeah, I think Dave's froze. Okay, all in favor, we're out of here.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you, everybody.